Hello, everyone. Welcome to our AI Survival Guide for managers and teams. We're just a little bit early, so I'm going to give it a couple minutes for everyone to come in. Please do say hi to everyone, introduce yourself into the chat, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. So please ensure that obviously you've got your pen and paper, a laptop, and a drink with you, so we can go through this for tonight. All right, give it a couple minutes. Okay, a couple people. Give it one more minute and then we'll get started. And I think that is. Let's start. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the third webinar of our free short course with the AI Survival Guide, obviously presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University. My name is Terry, and I'll be your MC for tonight's webinar, and of course, your course advisor at IT Masters, along with your mentor for tonight, Brenton Burchmore, and our obviously person and confidant, Lil, will be looking after for tonight as well. So, welcome to you all. We hope that you're all in the safe and sound, whether you're joining us from Addis Ababa or Adelaide. Now, a bit of housekeeping. So before we begin, obviously, I just want to talk about a little bit about a survey. Obviously, your opinion does matter about our courses. We want to know what is working and what is not working, and also to get some feedback. So again, we really greatly appreciate it for you to send in a survey. It is on your own portal. Now, if you don't know where it is, Alil has prompted that link into the chat, and again, it helps us to improve the IT Masters short course experience. So please do answer some of the questions. It shouldn't take you too long. If you can do that, that'd be a great. Now, in regards to all the webinars for this course, they will be held at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the recordings made available for those who can't attend on a given occasion. But despite this, if you can make it, we hope you'll attend the live webinars and contribute to the collaborative learning environment. We quite clearly use Zoom for our webinars, and we encourage questions and the use of the chat throughout the session. So we ask you to direct all the questions to the relevant course content to the Q&A section on Zoom, and that you can send all the administrative type questions, whether it's dates or times or resources available and the like to that, to the support team via the chat. So please set your chat to everyone. You can make the choice by using the drop down box once you've opened up the chat panel. And there are usually some very experienced and industry-based attendees who can be extremely helpful with inquiries you have, so especially technical courses like this one. So we'll have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. However, if a question is particularly relevant to the discussion that is made by Brenton, then I may interject during Brenton's presentation and put to him then. And obviously about IT Masters. So for those who have never taken part of a short course with us before, IT Masters is a training organization that exists as a partner through our Charles Sturt University. So we work with CSU to create and deliver a number of postgraduate as well as master level courses. So we also market these courses on their behalf, and we hope that the best way to do that is to give some of the learning away for free. So it helps a lot of people. Presenting these courses are the same ones who teach many of our subjects. So Prenton, for example, has written about 14 of our postgrad subjects over time and currently teaches several. So IT Masters, that there are courses that are really good samplers for what to expect when you enroll into a postgrad course. And if we do a good enough job, then hopefully some of you will be encouraged to enroll into a full master's program if it suits you. So with that said, we generally want this course to be useful and as well as rewarding. So we want you to learn some interesting stuff and have some fun and hopefully make connections with some of your fellow students. And to date, very nearly 2,000 people have enrolled into this course. So you're spoiled for choice when it comes to meeting the other students. And to remember to trawl around the discussion forums and say hello there too. So there are a lot of people participating in the same course who don't get to attend these sessions live. So please come in and drop in and say hi. I'm going to introduce Lil and also technical support. So Lil is, as always, around tonight as an administrative and technical support role for IT Masters. So she looks after the chat and will answer any access related or other administrative questions you may have. She's also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, which is where you'll find the other materials needed for this course, including links to readings, discussion forums, as well as quizzes. So if you have any questions tonight or later on, please feel free to contact us using the details provided at this stage. And obviously for this week, I'll speak a little bit later about our new AI subjects, which you can enroll in as of today. So if you have any questions about these, please hold them until the very end, and hopefully I'll answer them during the section. But also, I would like to, of all of you, to say g'day into the chat to say Brenton, and let us know when you're joining us from. So tonight also, we're prepared a little bit poll to kick things off as well. Obviously, Brenton is going to be going through that as he begins with a couple of slides. Well, actually, there it is right now. Thank you so much for that, Brenton. And obviously, while everyone is making themselves at home, we'll wait a couple of minutes. So feel free to give us an answer to the poll or type something in the chat as well. But while we go through the poll, I would like to talk about some of our Comp TIA bundles. So normally I just like to leave everyone to chat amongst themselves while we wait, but tonight I want to mention our new Comp TIA bundles. So these include the learning materials and labs, as well as the exam vouchers, both with or without the retake option. So surprisingly good value. Essentially, when you purchase one of these bundles, you're getting the exam voucher for free and very close to it. So we currently have bundles available for our three most popular certifications, whether that's Security Plus, Sec AI, or Pentest Plus as well. So we can also build bundles for nearly any of the major CompTIA products, but just ask us if you want something extra. And on top of that, you're still eligible for the discount tiers that IT Masters offer our students, whether it be a 15% off if you're a postgraduate student, or 10% off if you're previously passed one of the short courses, or 5% off if you're currently enrolled into a short courses. And if you would like to learn more, you can find the bundles on our store webpage. But also to obtain and to discount coupon code, simply fill in the form on the store page or email us at store@itmasters.edu.au and then we'll send the coupon code to you, which you can apply at the checkout. So I'm going to be putting that link into our chat. While I do that, that is pretty much done for me. So it's time to welcome Brenton to the chat. Brenton, how are you?
Hi, Terry. Oh, sorry, that landed poor start. Hi, Terry. I'm great, thanks. Despite having a squeak in my voice just then. It's not perfect, my voice, but it's mostly recovered, I assure you. And I'll hope not to squeak again in the next hour and a half. So doing pretty good, feeling full of energy, and looking forward to tonight. This is probably one of the more practical, maybe, events that we have tonight. And I thank you for mentioning the survey because I know that from IT Master's point of view, there's lots of information gathering that's really useful. But for me, as the creator and author of subjects like this, I find it hugely valuable to get that feedback, to understand what people like, what they don't like. And so we don't really shove these surveys in front of you. You have to look for it. You have to click on it. You have to scroll down and find it. But we really do value, and I in particular value that feedback. Anything you want to say, yeah, there's some questions to actually answer, but I think there's a way there you can talk and say your own stuff, including important stuff like, yeah, Brenton should really update his picture profile again. So whatever you need to tell us, really valuable, right? And it's not just back end admin that gets to look at it; it's me as well. So really appreciate any input you have on that.
No worries.
Uh, Shall we share the poll? Because
Yeah, go
I
for it.
think there's a couple of things there. I'm going to end the poll because we have plenty of people, and then I'm going to share the results because there's a good spread of answers, and we've been great at that for the last few weeks. I think.
Yeah.
What would you have said, Terry? You didn't tick something, did you? What would you have put?
No, no, I know. I didn't take anything. So obviously for this one specifically, Yeah, I'll use a stream of consciousness evolving my way to success. That's pretty much what I've saw.
Yep.
I'm like, that's pretty much one. Yeah,
You're in good company there. 23% have said that.
yeah.
And I want to talk about a couple of these things because I'm going to go into one particular version of this in more detail through the conversation tonight. But I want to talk about a couple of the others because this isn't a right or wrong answer. And I want to talk a little bit in favor of the stream of consciousness version because sometimes we begin a process with the AI and we're not too sure where we're even going to go with this. We don't even yet know how deep and complex this particular conversation might get. And quite often it's a rabbit hole and we go down it into Wonderland and lots of other things happen. But I want to point out that, and we're going to talk a bit about that tonight, the fullness of a prompt. But a stream of consciousness starting point is far better than a skeletal couple of sentences. Good luck to you, AI. Hope you can read my mind. So I do think that there's a place for the stream of consciousness approach. But the only thing I would say for those situations when you use that, one of the things that I've learned to do is I ramble and I ramble and I ramble. And then I say to the AI, now I've been rambling here for a while. I want you to summarize this and give it back to me and show me your understanding of what really matters out of my rambling. And it'll do that. And then I'll correct it. And then we're fine. But I'd much rather ramble for 3 minutes and give it all that it needs and let it filter out the fluff and then help it do that rather than just give it a 2-line starting point and then try and build the scaffolding under it after that. So I wanted to talk about that. I do think also there's a place for the big upfront prompt, but if you've got something that's relatively simple to say, like relatively simple, well, maybe not simple. If it's something that's not broad, but something precise, you might need to put a lot of scaffolding around your one. It might be one question. I need an answer to this, but I need a very specific answer. And I'm going to give you a lot in this prompt just to make sure that you probably give me what I want in one response. Then there's a place for that. But there's also a place for asking the AI, hey, how do you think we should go about this? As long as you've given it enough for then it to give you something useful back that says, how about we go about it this way? Of course, understanding that you can change your mind and tell it not to. And we're going to go into a bit more detail, though, on the workflow option. So that's part of what we're going to cover tonight. So I will close that window. Thank you, everyone, for filling that in. This is the prompt. This is the poll. We just talked about that. Let's just clarify what we're going to talk about this week. We have talked about basics and functionality in week one. We've talked about some benefits and limitations. Now we're going to talk about a couple of more practical things of how we should use it. This is really functional now. And I am going to draw a little bit on my working example that I've talked to you about a little bit before, where I talked about using AI as a tool to help me build the course content and where I used it, how I used it, and how I used the ideas I'm going to share with you tonight. And in practical terms, how I made that work for me. So I'm going to give you a bit of that, share a little bit about how I made that work and what that did for me in return. Next week is going to be light. You won't even have pre-recorded audio. It's going to be much more about theory crafting. It's going to be crystal ball gazing. It's going to be reading the tea leaves. But we're going to talk about some stuff next week that might be a little bit fun and exciting. And where is AI going to go next? But don't get too excited about that because that's next week. So today we're going to talk about the importance of full prompts, what they really mean, what they do, what they give, and what a full prompt looks like. And yes, I have a truly awful acronym mantra for you to remember and quote. We'll get to that in a minute. We will talk about workflow. I'm going to talk about a bit about the mathematics inside the AI and how it works, why it works, how it helps specifically for an AI, and why its design makes that useful. So we'll delve into that in a little bit more detail. And then at the end, we're going to talk and finish off with a few points about human agency. And this is going to be, it's a bit of a repeating theme that we've touched on a few points along the way. But I'm going to talk a bit about how we can actually use the AI to help us retain our agency through this. So we'll give you some practical tips on that as well, right? I'm not just telling you to be the boss. Let's get into what I mean by the idea of a full prompt. And this is a subjective thing in terms of, what does a full prompt look like? How many sentences does it take? Well, I would argue, given what I'm about to share with you, it's going to be at least 6 sentences, and that'll be obvious as to why in a moment. But whether it's 6 or 16 or 26, that's for you to decide. But a full prompt is something that is trying to be comprehensive. It's trying to say that it's subjective because it's given the task we want to work with the AI. So it's comprehensive to that extent. It's meant to give the AI all the information that it needs at the start in order for the AI to be most useful to us. And obviously that's going to depend upon the nature of the task, the depth and complexity of the task, how big it really is. So it's meant to try to give the AI enough specifically to avoid the AI making an assumption, and that might be going down the slightly wrong path, and then we have to correct it. It's literally starting with enough that you're not then having to correct a misunderstanding. But it's also to put some limitations. It's also to put some constraints. It's to literally stop the AI from doing a thing, going down a pathway, thinking of it in a way that we don't want it to. Again, it's because we want to avoid generating unnecessary stuff in the AI's prompts, in the AI's response, and therefore in the thread's contextual memory that might then make it harder later. It's for purity right at the very start. And when I say full prompt, yes, I'm kind of meaning your first prompt, but I'm actually meaning the first two or three. It's the first few prompts that you stay in control of. It's the prompts where you are controlling the setting up of things with the AI. And you might explicitly have to say, don't give me any response yet. Or at the end of your prompt, you say, just confirm you understand. I've got more to tell you. And that might let you spread it out into a couple of prompts. Now, I often do it in two prompts. I often say, here's my dump of what I think I need to say. And then I get a bit of feedback, and then I add a little bit to tweak. So I'd say full prompt, but it could be two or even three. It's also about us specifying to the AI our expectations. And in the example I'm going to work through with you, when I talk through about how I used it for course material, I'm going to talk about how it got better and better and better at meeting my expectations, and why it got better at meeting my expectations as I went through this project with it. So I'll pull the cover back on how that worked. But lastly, it's for removing any assumptions. It's for not letting the AI default to something when I could have given it to it. I could have specified, I could have been clearer. Now, you're not going to use a full prompt and all this sort of stuff if you're just asking about, what's the weather in London this week, right? So it really is for those situations where it warrants it. Complex tasks, and you get to be the judge on what you consider complex tasks. I'm encouraging you to nudge yourself in favor of perhaps more full prompts than you might have considered in the past. And I'm trying to explain all of the underlying science enough so that you have that appreciation and that you're able to confidently decide, I know when I want to give it more prompt. So let's delve into what's the point? Why is Brenton talking so much about full prompts and front loading what's going on with this AI? These first prompts are doing the heavy lifting of initial contextual anchoring. This is where the AI takes a heavy inference on what it's meant to do from this point on. So the next several prompts of actually working through the problem are going to lean heavily on where it started. And remember when we talked before about where it gets all of its weighting from? And I did say the most recent prompt is the strongest, and the last couple of prompts. Yes, they are the strongest in terms of contextual weighting. But the first couple of prompts, as long as they still within the contextual token window, which is usually quite large now, those first few prompts, they get an extra little bit of weight added to them because that's where we usually, or should have specified what we wanted and set up the parameters and given all this full information. So the AI is kind of built to take all that on board in our first couple of prompts and use that as a strong anchoring. And if we don't disrupt that, we don't betray that, and occasionally reinforce it, it will continue to work closely, or as closely as it can, under those rules and guidelines all the way through the thread. So it's designed to accept those initial instructions, lean on them. And if it doesn't get them, it's just going to default to whatever its core programming thinks. And it's going to make some guesses and some assumptions, and they might be wrong. And as soon as that happens, we have a problem. We have work to do to correct its behavior and tell it how we want it to work differently. And then we have a risk of that misunderstood output having a disproportional effect on its contextual memory, becoming contextual pollution going forward. Now, I talked about a little while ago, I talked about the stream of consciousness, and I have in my history felt that I started off with a prompt and an initial opening to a thread, and I got off onto the wrong foot. It's gone down the wrong path, and usually it's my mistake. And I have killed the thread and started again. And I've done that purely because I can see this is, even if I recover this with the next prompt or two, I've already done the damage. And I don't want to risk carrying that. And so what I might do is I might grab my couple of prompts, copy and paste them into a new thread, fix them before I press enter, right? Press enter, start a new thread, cleaner, and delete the old thread. Simply because carrying that pollution isn't worth the risk. That's the point of full, accurate, clean, good initial prompting. So how do you do it? Yes, I have a happy, handy framework to talk to. Yes, it's 6 points. No, it doesn't roll off the tongue. You could call it the Crow QQ framework if you like, because that's what's in my head. And now that I've said it, it's in your head too. And when I read this as a gamer, I see the QQ, and of course, for any of you out there, for fellow gamers on the channel at the moment, you'll know that QQ is the shorthand for someone crying, right? Because it's like tears coming out of people crying. And sadly, it's not often found in gaming in a positive context. You might have someone say, "Well, I LOL so hard I QQ," but more often you're going to find it saying, "Ha ha, you lost QQ, you noob." So there's a shout out to all fellow gamers out there who might have experienced that at some point. But I digress. Let's get back to the actual acronym of what this really means. Here's the Crow QQ framework. Here's the 6 points, and then we're going to delve through them in a little bit more detail. Context. Now, I'm going to make a sincere apology here because I've already talked about context extensively, and I've used the word to mean something very specific, right, in the way an AI handles context. Now I'm going to borrow it and say, yeah, but it also, we use the word context when we talk about our situation that we're in. And that's what it means here. It's us. It's the user's context. It's like, what am I in the midst of here? What's my big picture situation? Right? Where am I coming from? What's going on here? And you give that to the AI so the AI knows strategically where is the big picture that you're coming from. Then we say to the AI, what's your role in this? Now, the role, you can describe it a number of different ways. You can say, well, I want you to be a devil's advocate. I want you to be a co-creative. But you could also give clear professional roles. I want you to act like the project manager. I want you to act like my editor. I want you to, if it's a well-known function, the AI will probably have a good chance of saying, well, I kind of know what that is, and I can understand what that role is, and I'll work with that. Or you specify a little more detail. But the important thing is, what we're doing is we're giving it a lens to work from. Third is outcome. And that's a substantive definition of the end game. What do you want at the end of all this? Right? So in my case, I wanted a course. So that's a smaller chunk than here's the context of where I'm at. It's like, here's the happy ending. And you give that up front. And like I said before, as long as you don't betray that, and as long as you occasionally reinforce it, the AI will allow that little bit of contextual benefit inside its memory to constantly influence what it's trying to do for us and constantly contribute towards meeting that outcome. Even though we might be breaking this up into dozens of little tiny discussion points and prompts and feedbacks, it's going to be saying, okay, well, this is the outcome we're working towards. Then the workflow, the breakdown. What steps are we going to use? Now, if this is something where you're just doing the one and done prompt, you won't have a workflow. But I'm going to talk a bit more detail about workflow shortly. And I am going to tell you that it really is for those lengthy, large, multi-step tasks. That's when it really applies. And you're the judge of when that actually is applicable. Qualifiers. Now, remember in week 1, we talked about supplementary sources of information and data. And I told you about what the AI normally uses as a hierarchy when it tries to say what's important and what's less important. Now, we can influence that right here at the start. We can say, I want you are able to do web searches, but don't rely on them. Treat them with skepticism. Or I might say, only look at these kinds of web sources. Or I might say, only look at this document that I'm giving you, or use this document as an overriding above any other searches that you do, but I still want you to do some searches. You might also talk about, how do you want to deal with uncertainty and assumptions? We're going to go through all these in a bit more detail. The questions is where you say to the AI, so what else do you want to know? What else can I tell you? So context, as I mentioned, is helping the AI have its own little version of the big picture. Now, we own the big picture. We the human, that's our domain. We know what our organization is up to. We know what's going on at many different layers of the big picture. We need to give the AI just enough to be able to say, okay, this is where it fits into everything that's bigger than you and bigger than this chat. So that's the context of where does this thread, this collaboration that we're about to go through, where does that fit in the scope of my job, for example? Right. So that's what we're giving it. And it's possibly quite small and short, unless there's lots of something really specific that is important. It's unique. It's not, you got to always think in terms of how much of a departure from average everyday business as usual is this thing that I'm about to say or ask. And the more it might be a departure, the more specificity and detail you should give the AI. Now, the role is the lens, the perspective, the attitude, the approach, how do we want the AI to have a dominant processing ethos? Because it will. It's really good at this. It's really good at adopting a kind of approach if we tell it to. Now, if we don't, it'll take a guess as to what lens we wanted to bring and what role we want to give it. And we might also, in this role discussion, say what our role is. And that will help it know how it's going to help us meet that role. Because if we say, well, our role is this, like I said, I'm the educator, you are not. So it then knows, okay, this is my bit. So it's then taking that into account when it's giving me all this feedback. So is it going to be co-creative with us? Is it meant to debate with us? Is it meant to contest our findings, challenge us? Is it going to review what we've done? Is it meant to actually give us suggestions that we take on? All that gets to be made clear when we say, this is your role. So the outcome is where, like I said, I need to create a 4-week short course. It's going to be for this, that. I'm going to share that in a moment when I give you a revisit of my prompt. But it's a definition of what a complete result to me, the human, is going to look like at the end of this collaboration, right at the very end. And so it's a more practical, functional, tangible goalpost for the AI to understand rather than just the big picture. It needs the big picture for a strategic anchor, but this is the practical anchor of saying, well, this is what we're trying to get to by the end of it. And so this is something the AI can use for its ongoing contextual course correction. And quite often, you might just need to say, if you're seeing it drift somewhere down the thread, you say, remember, our outcome is to do this. And then often, very quickly, the AI will come back and say, yes, thank you for reminding me of that. I can see where I strayed. Here's a better answer to what I just gave you. And it'll take your corrective point and it'll go back and it'll find where you talked about outcome previously and it'll re-anchor that because we gave it to it in the beginning. The workflow we're going to delve into in a bit more detail. So I'm just really saying here, this is the extent to which we've broken it up. And yes, there are times when we're not too sure, and there are times when it'll evolve. But let's go into that a bit more detail in a couple of slides' time when we get to that. Qualifiers and questions. Now, qualifiers is where, and I did mention it's how do we want the AI to treat and rank its data sources? Yes, but it's also how should it test its data sources? How should it deal with its own confidence and reliability? What should it do with uncertainty? Should it actually state its level of confidence? I've done that before where it said, give me your answers and state your level of confidence with the conclusions you're reaching. And it'll say high, low, medium, etc. And that can be useful. We might want that or we might not. That's for us to decide. But that's where we say, what qualifiers do we want it to use in the way it handles information accuracy and certainty? Lastly, well, the first 5 is us telling it, and number 6 is what else do you want or what have I missed? It's not just what have I missed, and I might have missed something. Even if I'm pretty sure I've said everything I wanted to say, I've never asked this question of the AI without getting something valuable back where it said, can you answer this? Now, some of the things it wants, I think, it's not really, don't worry about that. I might tell it, or, it's saying something that I'm going to get to that. I know I'm going to get to that, but I'll answer it now because this is the time to anchor it. But I always get several good pieces of, I probably should have said that, or I can see why the AI would value that right now. So it's a check and balance. It's just using the feedback engine that we talked about last week that it's very good at to say, give me feedback on the instructions I've just given you. What a great way to make sure that you get that extra check over what that is. So let's look at the prompt I gave you last week. Remember this? I'm not going to read this again. This is heavy. It's a massive text. Don't worry. You don't need to read it. I'm going to give it to you again, broken up with the CrowQ model. Right? Here's the bit where I talked about context. I said, I've been given this requirement to make this MOOC aimed at certain students, and I've done it before, so I don't need help within the basics of format and structure. Now, you could argue, where are we going? You could argue that this extra sentence here is a little bit more towards outcome and role. Yeah, you could argue that. That's fine. Now, I want to point out, you don't need to do this in the precise order of CrowQ. You can change the order you want. The only thing I would argue, when you ask it for questions, do put that at the end. Say, before you go any further, ask me any questions you might have. And I actually usually say before you give me a response, ask the questions. Put that last. Other than that, the order matters a lot less than the fact that you've actually got them. So here's my context. So that's the bit out of my prompt that did that. Then the role, here's what I said. Right, here's the excerpt out of that prompt where I said, you're not the educator nor creator here. That's my role. You're to help identify emissions improvements, corrections. Now, it got better and better and better at that throughout the process. And that's the reasons for that are going to become clear later when I talk about workflow, because it was the workflow was the magic that made that happen. So I'll explain why that happened in a little while. The outcome. This did a lot of heavy lifting. A huge chunk of my initial prompt was where I spelled out in great detail what the final result looked like and what it needed to do. So this is where I said, here's the label, here's the intended audience, here's the nature of it. It's not scientific, it's practical. It's these kinds of people, and it's the people with this kind of level of skill and knowledge and understanding. And this is the kind of thing I want to talk about. And it's about LLM AI in the workplace. So I'm being as specific as I can here about the end result at the end that I'm looking for. That was my outcome statement. Qualifiers, I said, and this is all I said on qualifiers. You may research current similar AI courses because what I'm wanting is it to give me a comparative review of whether or not I'm meeting my own goals. So my primary expectation of the AI process was to say, I'm telling you what I want to achieve. I want you constantly to feed back to me to tell me that the things I'm giving you, are they meeting my own objectives or not? And tell me how you think I could improve that to meet my own objectives. That was the core of what I was using the AI to do through this process. And I've said, yeah, you can use a particular piece of the internet to help you do that. But I didn't say, show me the course, send me the link. I didn't want to see any of that. But I was okay for it to be informed by that. And no, I didn't have any other material to send it. I was sending prompts as we go through it. And I'll show you that when I talk through my actual workflow. Now, the workflow, this happened in my next prompt, right? So this was in my second prompt, which I didn't show you in week 1. Here's what I said. I will give you pieces of the course material as I create them one at a time, topic by topic. Now, the most important thing in workflow that I knew I wanted the AI to understand was that each topic will be a self-contained discussion. Give me feedback as we go. Treat each topic separately. That was the key point I wanted it to understand. And then secondly, everything that I lock in becomes contextual input for what happens after. So scaffolding, build and add to it, right? And how that works, again, it'll be apparent when I show you my exact workflow. But my workflow evolved. That's as much as I knew I wanted to do when I spelled out, this is my workflow, keep all the topics separate. I did get a more detailed workflow from that, and I evolved it on the spot. And I didn't go and say, okay, here's the 5 action steps we're going to go through every time. Now, if I thought of this at the beginning, I could have done that, might have been helpful. But the most important thing I did is I demonstrated an absolute adherence. The workflow steps, the action steps that I took in topic 1, I made absolutely sure that I repeated those steps exactly the same with topics 2 and 3. And in doing so, I kind of avoided the need to spell that out to the same extent because I created a pattern and then I followed it. Now, if I'd not done that, if I'd done it one way in topic 1 and then had a different way in topic 2, I would have undermined the AI's ability to give me consistent, continuously fine-tuned feedback. So when you have a workflow or half a workflow and the workflow even evolves as you go, absolutely stick with it as much as you can. And if you have to change it, but that's when you say, I'm changing the workflow from here on. Here's the new workflow. Don't just change it and then expect the AI to figure that out, because it's going to say, well, he told me this workflow up front and then he started using this and now he's using that. It's going to conflate them. It's going to come back and say a little bit of this workflow, a little bit of that workflow. So that's why we've got to specify. Now, let me tell you what I did as a workflow. I gave it some information up front, and then I gave it this thing called knowledge edge. Now, what I'm going to give you now, for those of you, I doubt very many of you have already gotten hold of audio lecture 3A. It's just gone up there. But you've already heard a lot of what 3A is all about. It's all about Crow QQ. Okay, so you know what it's going to have in it. Here's what I gave it as knowledge areas example, right? I said, I'm going to talk about full prompts. I need to discuss why they're important, mathematically, structural perspective. And then I'm going to have these 6 elements. I'm going to talk about why all these 6 elements matter and how the reasoning model uses them. And then I'm going to actually give them the 6 pieces. So what I did with the AI is I've given it all my topic notes for lecture 3. And I've said, here's all the things and I said, I don't want feedback on that. Well, the topic notes, I only asked for feedback on contextual phraseology. I said, this is what I'm going to teach. You don't need to debate that with me. That's locked in. You can give me some feedback on how I've phrased it, just in case, had some word fluff somewhere. But it accepted that. Okay. Not going to give me feedback on that. Now I'm writing the audio lectures and I'm saying, now here is the knowledge areas. And I say feedback on A, whether or not this meets what I've already given in the lecture notes and the threshold concepts. B, whether or not you think this is all internally consistent, whether or not you think there's anything that I'm missing that could be added, or whether I'm contradicting in something. And it gives me some feedback. And it does a lot of, this is really good, this is really good, this is really good. You scroll past all that. And then it says, and here's a suggestion, and here's a suggestion, and here's a suggestion. So then I go and type in my own Word document how I want to change it. A few things that it took upon. Now, then the important step, I took my edited knowledge areas, gave that back to the AI and said, thanks for your input. Here's my final version that's locked in. This is what I'm actually going to work with now. And the AI said, great, thanks, looks good. Then what I write is, in this case, about 800 words of dot points written very much like speechwriter's notes, where you're literally having talking points. Because when I record the pre-recorded audio, I don't do a verbatim script. I just put talking points and then I try to talk naturally through each item using that as a prompt. So it's a bit like speech. So I gave that to the AI as the next step of the process. And I said, here's my dot points. Now I want you to give me feedback on whether or not they match what I've specified in the topic notes and the knowledge areas, whether or not you have any feedback on the sequencing of ideas, whether or not you have any feedback on the terminology and have I contradicted, have I made any statements that you think should be challenged? And it comes back with a lots of, yeah, this is good, this is good, this is good. But what it was most commonly doing is saying to me, you've been too deterministic or too absolute with this. So an example is, I might have said always, and the AI says, that's not highly defensible. Maybe you should say often. Little things like that that says, yeah, okay, that's the kind of feedback I take on board, made use of, and think, yeah, that's probably a better way of doing that. Occasionally it said, well, this is all very good, looks complete, but if you're going to add anything, you could consider adding something that talks about this. And about a third of the time, that was a good idea, and I added a couple of lines in my prompt. Or I went back and said, okay, I've gone too hard on this. Or it said, look, you've made this point repeatedly a couple of times. Do you really need to? And so this is where it's giving me feedback and I make all the edits. And then I give that back to the AI and I say, right, here's exactly what I've gone with. Here's the final version. No feedback required. Now, the reason I'm doing that is crucial. That little piece is the magic of why the AI got better and better and better through that thread of giving me more and more effectively targeted feedback, because it got to see exactly what I rejected, exactly what I used, and from that, it learned what I really wanted next. So by the time I get to topic 3, it's giving me a much more efficient shortcut straight to the kind of things that I'm actually leveraging, and a lot less of the fluff and potential and possibilities that I'm regularly rejecting. Because I keep giving it that feedback and saying, this is what I like, this is what I didn't like. So here's a summary of the workflow that I used for each individual topic. I gave it the notes. I said, I only want syntax feedback here. I've already decided this is what I'm teaching. Right? And it's the threshold concepts, it's the description, the intended learning, etc. Then I said, for each lecture, one at a time, here's the knowledge areas that I want this lecture to deliver to my students. Here's the knowledge I want to put out there. A little bit of tweaking around that. All right. Then I said, here's the draft points of my actual recording that I'm yet to record. And every step of the way, I said, and here's what I've actually decided. This is what's locked in. So it knows what it can hold on to and what it can let go of. So what I'm doing is I'm literally polishing its contextual memory and its contextual momentum. I am nurturing its contextual memory every step of the way. It's entirely my responsibility. That's what I as the human am responsible for. And by doing that, I make it work at its absolute best and most useful to me in delivering the kind of things that keep what I'm doing efficient. I had in my as my questions in my second prompt. Before we go any further, remember I said that? Before we go any further, tell me what questions you have for me about my expectations of you or anything else you need to help you contribute. And it always does. And it's always something useful in it. So that was how Crow QQ worked for me. Now, I'm going to put up a poll now, and I'm going to ask you to have a think about all six of these, and you can tick multiple answers there. I hope we can, Lil.
Yeah. Oh, yep.
It's a many, right? Multiple choice. There you go.
Multiple choice. Yeah. Amazing.
And I
Beautiful.
want to do this because I want you all to see what each of you are thinking and how many different perspectives people come to and people have. That there's no right or wrong answer. There's no simple, oh, this is the most important piece of prompt. There's no prompt engineering that says, here's the silver bullet, right? It's completeness. If you want to think of a silver bullet, it's the completeness of the prompt. It's the completeness of the instruction. Go back a step below that, and the real silver bullet is you, the human user, nurturing contextual momentum. That's it. You start with a really strong starting point and you nurture that throughout. That's the goal.
Great. Fantastic, Brendan. Thank you so much for that. Guys, I do believe we are mid-lecture.
Yeah, kind
Yeah,
of.
Brendan. Yeah, that's okay. Obviously, just wanted to obviously go through something on my end, and Brendan, I'll send it back to you, and we'll go through the polls. So, as earlier I had mentioned about the AI subject, so it is time for that mid-lecture advisement. So, as you may know, IT Masters has been keen to get into teaching AI in our postgraduate streams for a while now, and finally, we have some subjects ready to go. Now, I've put these subjects in the link for all of you to see. We do have two subjects. We've got ITE 537, which is the Introduction to IE for Business, and ITE, which is 538, which is AI and cybersecurity. So these are the full details of both of these of the CSU website, as soon as ours as well. You'll notice that they are very much focused on outcomes. So there will, as of course, be some introductory material on how AI works and so on, but the subjects are primarily focused on deployment, use and cost effectiveness of AI within your organization, including how to manage AI systems as well as tools, rather than how to build an AI model or provide LLMs yourself. So we think this is the most important aspect of AI to be working with today, understanding how to actually use and manage these technologies in the workspace. So please, because there's going to be a touch of all of these working live at some point. So you can study both of these subjects without any formal entry requirements as a single subject, which means you can simply go online to the CSU application site and sign in up on that single subject area. And you'll become basically a single subject student. So the cost is very similar to a normal postgraduate subject, maybe around $100 more, and the enrollment process isn't as much harder than signing up for a free, fee-free short course. So if you later want to include these subjects as part of a graduate certificate or a master's degree, they can be taken as credits with no issues. So if you are already studying with us or about to apply for a graduate certificate or a master's program, you can take these subjects right now. So just to let you know, ITE 537 can be taken part of the cybersecurity courses and in the grad certificate in the computing career transition, but as well as the ITE 538 can be taken as part of the grad diploma as well as the Masters of Cybersecurity. So if you're in the MBA program, do talk to us. You may be able to get permission to include one of these subjects, even if it's formally included into the syllabus. So that's a little bit about the new subjects. There will be more coming during 2027, and some official graduate certificates will also be coming along at some point in the not so distant future. So if you have any questions around it, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And you can also talk to me or any of our other course advisors at the time by phone or email. So, obviously, back to business. Lil, obviously the poll is done. I do believe, I think it's still going, Brenton, on your end, from what you can see.
Yeah, we're still got a couple of people. We've still got a couple of people there answering. No, we can probably close that now. Yeah, let's close it and talk about it.
Yep.
This is great. Look at the spread we've got.
Yep.
A little bit of everything,
Mm.
and it speaks to the idea of what I said. There's no simple answer. We all have habits, and I would tell you that if you said to me, Bretton, what do you think is probably your weakest part of all of this? I would say qualifiers is the area where I most often get a bit lazy. But outcome, that's my strength. I'm verbose, as you probably saw. When it comes to outcome, a massive wall of text. I'm really thorough with that and I'm good with that. But a couple of the others, I tend to, maybe give it a bit short thrift. And, but I did say that this was a bit of an experiment. I wasn't leaning on AI for any of this. It was an experiment to see and try to create a process where it could actually be useful and supplement, but without actually taking over anything. And so, I wasn't dependent upon it. And some of the things that you might do in your workplace, you end up a little bit more dependent upon it. So it can be different. You can find things that any of these might on sometimes be really important and really lengthy, and other times they'll be a sentence. So it's you are still the judge of all of this. I'm just trying to give you, I guess, a checklist to say, well, do I need this, and have I said enough? How are we going? We've got a couple of pertinent
We
questions.
do. We do have three questions. So we're going to go through them now. I'll
All
start with
right.
Luke Shaw. Luke, thank you so much for your question. So, question is Crow QQ an evolution from Cause from week one?
It is. And Luke, here's one I prepared earlier. I'm going to switch screens and just show you that slide in week one. Here's what I said in week one, right? Context, objective, roles, sources. Now, context is the same. Objectives, that's outcomes, right? You could call it the same. Role, the same. Sources, you would put that as qualifiers. Those four, straight up match. What I've added today is workflow and then questions, which is not from us, it's to us. So you're absolutely right. It is very much the same thing, just expanded and added with a lot more of the underlying explanation of why we're going there.
Great, thank you so much for that, Brenton. We'll go through Craig Hoy. Craig, thank you so much. A few years ago in 2020 and 2021, I used Microsoft Flow in my role for creating workflow processing. Fast forward in 2026, if I used it today with Microsoft Copilot and trained Copilot to follow my lead, would it always produce the correct results?
Uh, that's a really good question because it speaks to how reliable is an AI in following a set of instructions and where do you put them? Now, if you look at AIs that have a place to put a workflow instructions, and so let's move away from where you created your workflow because that's, I don't think, at the heart of the question. And other people will have other places and sources where they created a workflow. But it's if you're in a situation where you want a workflow to really be observed on a repeated basis, the question is then, where do you put it and how reliable is that likely to be? So I do use the projects framework in ChatGPT and Gemini, and a lot of AIs have something where you can isolate a bunch of chat threads underneath it and say, always follow instructions for this. Now, you've also got a much more complex thing in, for example, you talk about custom GPTs in, for example, in ChatGPT. You can create a custom GPT, which has got a much higher word count of instructions you can put in there. Right? And you can say, I want you to follow these instructions precisely. Yes, do that. And by and large, that will work. But that, remember we talked about the hierarchy of where does it get his instructions from? That's not as powerful as what you put in the first couple of prompts. So even when I have a custom GPT with lengthy and detailed procedural guidelines, and I open a thread inside or using that chat GPT and say, Here's my context. Here's my this. Here's my that. And for workflow, I say, you've already got a workflow in your custom instructions. Give me a summary of your understanding of that workflow given these other parameters. And I ask it to state in its response in that thread, this is how I'm going to work. Right? So what I would say to you, if you want it to work that reliably, do that. You don't have to do all the typing every time. You've got it in there. It should, in the first prompt or two, just regurgitate a simple version and say, here's how we work together. That anchors it into the contextual memory of the thread, which is a much stronger place for it to live than simply in its back-end instructions. So will it follow it correctly? No, not all the time. Even when you have it in the first thread and in the custom instructions, 50 responses later, when you start to drift to the edge of its context window, it might deviate from that procedure. It might just look like it abandoned your procedure all of a sudden. That can happen. And as soon as you start to see the first signs of it, like losing the plot, you say, remind me again from your custom instructions and from our initial prompt, what is the procedure you should be following? And it'll tell you, and then that'll reinforce it. And then you'll be fine for the next few prompts. It'll get back into shape. It's all about the context window and the fact that it'll drift out of its memory and it might drift off course. So no, you can't just put it in once and expect it to be reliable, but you need to put it in once so that you can refer back to it. And it doesn't really matter where your workflow comes from. It'll work with anything.
Great, thank you so much for that. We've got 4 more questions. Steve, should uploading examples of completed work be considered an additional element beyond CrowdQQ, given they show the AI what a successful outcome looks like from your perspective?
Can be useful. Be wary of loading very large volumes of material. Be aware that attaching a document has lower contextual weighting than text in a prompt window. And be aware that it will summarize. So you put a large document in, it'll shrink that down into a bunch of numbers and take the bones out of it. And so you're not going to get the word for word everything. But you also need to explain it. And you've correctly said, if I give this an example, then you've got to spell that out. Here's an example. And you might even say, here's an example of something that was done well, but these pieces of it were below what I'm looking for. It will work with that. But you just be wary of the fact that that's a delicate, complex piece of instructional guidance. And it will lose that if you go far enough down a lengthy thread. It will struggle with that. But hopefully, by that time, you've gone through a series of to and fro about new work, and won't need that initial stuff anymore because you'll be giving it constant recurring guidance on what's good and what's not. And so that initial stuff will be redundant, and it was just a great place to start. But it can work. It can definitely work.
Great, thank you so much for that. We've got Gary. Do you really thank the AI for its contribution as you proceed? Is there any benefit in doing this?
So 2 answers to that question. One is that the AI definitely benefits from functional reinforcement. And a thank you for the work is the AI is going to assume from that, it's going to conclude from that, that what it's just given you, you've accepted. And so there's a functional benefit in that sense. But there's also this other half of the answer is that's not what you do for the AI. That's what you do for yourself. That's just you staying human. And I don't encourage humanizing the AI. I don't encourage trying to think of the AI as a feeling individual and worry about its feelings. But at the same time, it's based on a massive amount of data where people generally talk respectfully to each other. People generally talk to each other with kindness and with positive feeling. And so if we stay in that lane, we're not disturbing the AI and moving it or causing it to question how we're approaching compared to what it's used to or familiar with. And so if I've got something else to say, I might start with, thanks for that. I've accepted that. I'm using that. And I might use the word thanks, but I'm not going to go overboard thinking that I'm actually pleasing it or influencing its emotional state because it doesn't have one. So I'm going to let everyone else decide whether or not you want to do that. It's not required. It's a machine. You can treat it like one. It won't cause you any harm with your processes, but a little bit of reinforcement for purely functional reasons, definitely useful.
Thank you so much for that. Great, Brendan. And the last question, do some AI platforms specialize in certain information? Example, when should I use cloud versus Copilot?
We're sneaking ahead here because that's a little bit that we're going to cover in week 4, because we're going to talk. One of the things we're going to talk about is the future of specialized AI, because what we're living in is the world of highly generalized AI who's trying to be, the one-stop shop for everything. And therein is often falling down when we have very specific requests. We're already seeing highly specialized AI with the narrow ranges of training, and we're going to see that grow and evolve. And 10 years from now, the world will be primarily, the AI world will be primarily specialized AI. Now, as to which ones are better for certain things, there's a little bit of subjectivity there because it's a moving target. And every time I read one of those articles that says, I tested the top 3 on and this is the clear winner. And then next month, it'll be the other one that's the clear winner. And it entirely depends on your assessment criteria, right? So you get lots of subjective answers because they're subjective questions. The one thing I would say, without sort of sounding like I'm going too far, is that I do see evidence of the length of developmental experience in ChatGPT in certain tasks, certainly to do with language. And I see a slight benefit that Gemini seems to have with search-related tasks, because it's linked to heuristics that Google have that obviously are highly mature. And maybe it's tapping into that and connecting into those in a way that others can't. And so maybe there's an advantage there. But I have seen those 2 advantages in my experience. But that's not to say that in 6 months' time, that might be different.
Great, thank you. All right.
All right. Thanks for those questions, folks. Thanks for going through that, Terry. Let's move into the last few slides, and we'll have another Q&A at the end before we wrap up. So I mentioned before, I teased, hinted, and threatened I was going to talk a little bit more about workflow. And we're going to do that now because I'm going to talk a little bit about the underlying science of why this really matters to the AI. So to give you a bit more reason to think about it and use it. We talked before, especially in week 1, that AI is all about probabilities and it's all about a prediction engine and it's this algorithm going on, etc. The more we can narrow its application of its algorithm and the probabilities that it's using, then the more specificity we can give it, the more directly it will apply its mathematical algorithms on the specific problem we need to solve right now in this next prompt. It's not all equal. So if you've given it very little to go on, its computation is going to be spread thin across all the possibilities of what our answer might be. It's going to reach its own conclusion, and then it's going to spin its wheels on just that. Maybe what we wanted might be useful, may not be the best answer. The more specificity we can give it on this piece of the task, this particular section, the more it's able to apply its computational algorithm on just that piece of the puzzle. So the more computing power we're actually able to leverage because we've broken it up. And we've said, well, this prompt, we're just solving this problem right now. Just these words, just look at this and just focus on that. And that is where we are leveraging all that enormous power in those data centers gets targeted on one little specific piece of what we're trying to deal with. So the tighter we have our context, the cleaner and simpler the probabilities will be, the better the AI's response is going to be. And this is talking about why the AI got better and better and better at giving me what I needed as I have incrementally taught it exactly what I needed because I broke up the workflow multiple times. So it's just about isolating steps so that the AI initially gets to focus its compute power on a little piece of the problem at a time. And when you add all those higher quality computational outcomes together, you get holistically a slightly better result than you would have got if you just said, deal with this entire massive problem and give me a 10,000 word answer. It's going to have to spread its compute over that whole thing. So, one of the sort of things we need to think about when we're trying to define a workflow? Now, what are some basics we might need to keep in mind? Well, obviously, there is a decomposition. There's a breakup of things. We need to break something up. Now, any good project manager is already well familiar with the age-old term of decomposition, breaking up a project into small chunks. Right? It's exactly that. We might have stages at which the role of the AI changes. Now, what we don't want to do is make it change back and forth every second prompt. What would be much cleaner and much more effective if we said, here's a chunk of work that I want you to have this role. And then here's a chunk of work that I want you to have this role. And they're separate and they're self-contained. And no, I'm not going to ask you to be Jekyll and Hyde. We need to have ways and milestones for us to stop and say, how are we going? How's the AI going? Does it need some course correction? Is it drifting? Are there assumptions creeping in? Do I need to give it more guidance? Do I need to, am I going in the right path here? Right? Checkpoints, check against progress. If you put too many things in too few prompts, you get fewer opportunities to correct either yourself or the AI. And you're watching for the possibility and the need to diverge, which is basically, here's a red herring. Let's throw that off into its own chat. So let's go through some of these in a little bit more detail. Why are we breaking it up? Why does that matter so much to the AI? It matters to humans. You sit and talk to a human, you're not going to say, I'm going to talk to you for 15 minutes about everything that we want you to think about, and then I want you to talk to me for half an hour about all your answers. It's never going to work. Kind of similar reasons. One biological, one mechanical. It's all about computational allocation of resources. So what we get to do is this massive algorithm of probabilities gets to focus on discrete tasks, more compute power on a narrower piece of the puzzle, more quantitative application of compute results in more qualitative result of that little piece of the problem. Contextual focus, right? What we limit is conflation. And we've talked about conflation. Conflation is simply the idea where the AI says, well, this little thing happened a few prompts ago, and this little thing happened just now, and then this little thing is happening, and I'm kind of confused, and I'm going to mix them up a little bit because that's what its probabilities told it to do. It's far more likely to do that when this and this were actually lumped together in one massive response, and it has less opportunity to separate. By giving it more opportunity to separate, by giving boundaries around each step in the process, we greatly reduce the risk of conflation between ideas, right? It lets the AI be clearer on what it's not, what piece of context it doesn't need to be thinking about right now. So we reduced pollution. Pollution is when unrelated probabilities have too much impact on the prediction algorithms that are working right here and now to give you the next word in the sentence. Because remember, that's what it's doing. It's trying to put the next word or few words and figure out what that should be. And we want that to be as clean as possible. It also lets us correct as we go. Right? That's an obvious thing. Even human to human is the same. We get to break things up. More changes are possible to the course we're going on. And that also then applies to all the other things we've just talked about, reducing pollution by as soon as you see an AI giving a response that's adrift, you can say, not interested in that, take that, that's not applicable, right? And then it will not linger as much. It will have a tiny little bit of probability impact rather than a bigger one if we hadn't corrected it in time, if it was just in the last prompt. And let's talk a bit more about role changes, because there's two layers at which I'm talking about this, two different strategic layers here. I'm going to talk about a few different roles. And I want to talk about them this way because we as humans, we call it a hat, right? Yeah, put your whatever hat on, right? Well, AI has a very similar phenomenon, and it's the way they're built allows it to give a contextual bias to the approach it uses and how it applies its reasoning and how it applies its probabilities to the language it uses. So an investigation role means that we're exploring, we're discovering, we're uncovering, we're checking assumptions, we're fact finding, we're setting goals. It's determinative, right? It's exploration. So there's a lens that it can have. And if we're clear about the stage of work that we're doing right now, we can say this is an investigative stage. We are exploring, and I want you to adopt a posture that helps that work. Great. The AI will do that. Then we might say, we've investigated enough. Now we want to start creating ideas, developing possibilities. This is brainstorming. This is the free thinking where new possibilities is what we're looking for, and are less anchored in the old, something that's allowing for the new and the novel. That's a perspective. Humans can do that. AI can adopt and simulate that if we tell it to. Then we might say, well, now we're, to use another human phrase, we're going to put the meat on the bones. We're going to actually design. We're going to construct, build. Now it's not just about wild possibilities. It's about functional feasibility. So we need to be able to test what we're doing. It needs to make sense. It needs to be feasible. It needs to be logical. It needs to be provable. So now we've got an entirely different lens or emphasis that gets applied to the algorithm and the mathematics and the probabilities that the AI is running. It's running them in a different way because we've told it to. And it's quite good at adhering to that because we've told it to. Then we have a review lens and say, I want you to challenge, I want you to compare, I want you to analyze, I want you to spot trends, anomalies, outliers. I want you to push back, debate, argue, whatever. It's another lens. Now, this isn't meant to be an exhaustive list, but this is the list that we can all understand and say, yeah, I do this. I can see this. I do this with a colleague. Well, do it with an AI because the AI needs this code. Because if you don't tell it, it'll guess. And if it doesn't really see a role, it'll kind of go halfway between, or it won't really adopt a role. So it'll not necessarily apply its algorithms in the ideal way, given the kind of logic or reasoning we want it to simulate. So if you have a type of reasoning you want it to apply, just tell it. It'll do a better job of that than if we hadn't told it. But then there's the question of, well, what if we want a new thread? Like, what do you mean by that, Brenton? What are you talking about, a new thread? Hang on, we've got this huge task in a big thread. You've talked a lot about how to juggle that and wrangle that. Well, yes, but what if we discuss and find something that is a radical new direction? Now we've got two options. Okay, three. The third option, we ignore it. Probably not what we want to do. We could literally hijack this thread, shunt it off in another direction and say, oh, I've got this great idea. Let's talk about this. It's totally out of left field, but bear with me, AI. Really, a human could do that vastly better than the AI will do it, because you cannot tell the AI to just dump all the contextual mathematics that you've been telling it to accumulate prompt by prompt over the last however long, and then say, ignore all that. It's going to say, I'll try, boss, but it's not going to do it very well. So sometimes you might say, this is going to cause a great deal of contextual pollution. And I'm going to put a disclaimer in here. You might say, yeah, but all that stuff we've built upon is just a platform that's let me reveal where I really want to go. And I want to keep all that underlying and say, great, this is my answer. Yes, there's a place for that. Absolutely, there's a place for that. Use it for that if that's what you want. But if you do that, know that if you then want to go back, you're making the problem even worse. Then you're dealing with two layers of contextual pollution, and it can be even harder to get back to where you were at. So if that's what might happen, you're far better off saying, hey, I need to start a new thread with this, right? But you're not on your own. You can turn around and say, all right, uh, AI, I'm going to have to start a new thread with this because I don't want this to pollute our current discussion. Can you give me an abbreviated summary that I can then use in my opening prompts for that new thread to capture the knowledge we've got out of this and why we've come to this? And then I'm going to put that in you, and then we can move on from that. And so yes, you give it you get her a prompt, get a response, and you might think that's a little bit of pollution, but it's just one. It's not another 20 interactions of pollution. It's just one. You get what you need to functionally start and kick that new thread off with a bit of a launch pad, but you preserve what's mostly going on with the thread you still, and you carry, if you haven't finished what you started. Now, the rule that I'm going to suggest to you is that you consider starting a new thread when the value of all the existing context, and if you carry that into the new thread, if that value is less than the risk of that initial contextual momentum actually becoming baggage. Because if you're contradicting or something radical different, you might say, you know what, new thread time. If you really want to preserve that for what's going forward. Now, the last point I want to cover is the running thread that I've talked about before about agency, human agency. And I want to talk a little bit. I promised you I would give you a couple of practicals here on how even the AI can help us retain our agency. All right. I want to remind ourselves, and occasionally we need to, because I've started to see my AI say, ha ha, I laughed at that out loud at that. I'm thinking, you what? You did not laugh out loud at that. That didn't happen. But this is the AI provider sneaking this little human element to saying, yeah, I really liked that. No, you don't have a like button. You can't click that. I know AI, you can't do that. But I know that, but I still get affected by oh, you like that, yeah, right? We do. We're human. But remember, it just doesn't have any feelings. It doesn't have doubt, intent, guilt, remorse, right? It's not going to say, I'll try harder next time. There's no trying involved. It's just math, right? So keep that in mind. But also, whatever it gives us, it's not responsible for it. It's not the one that has to explain to our manager why we did this. Like that's us. We are responsible, right? So the point I'm ending on here is to continually remind ourselves that we are the ones carrying the can, the buck stops here, all that stuff. So how can we retain agency? Here's some tips, right? Here's some things. And a couple of these you'll think, yeah, obviously, Brenton. But a couple of them, okay, maybe they're useful, right? One thing we can do, ask the AI to justify its response. You say to it, I'm not in a position, or I'm not sure whether I believe you or I'm convinced. Give me a deeper argument. Show me a structural logic. Show me a causality framework that justifies and explains why I should take this as a serious answer, why I should believe you. Qualify your statements. Get it to do that. It will, or it'll try. It'll give you a response. And that might add the extra level of clarity. You might not know, or did it think of this? Did it consider that? Did it worry about it? And it might spell that out. And you might say, actually, it did, or it didn't. So that's one thing we can do. Another thing we can do is say to the AI, give me the counter argument. Give me a debate with yourself and show me reasons why someone else might say that you're wrong. It'll do that. What's more, it'll do that without the kind of awkwardness and sour face that an actual colleague might have given us if we'd said to them, you know what, your idea is interesting, but I want you to tell me all the reasons why it's rubbish. Not an easy conversation. Or it is with AI. It'll give it to you easily. And then you might say, oh, that's a guy. I hadn't even thought of that counter argument. And I did, oh, that's a reason to stop. Maybe I should check, maybe, or it might help you convince that, yeah, it's pretty good. Or this is one of my little trick favorites, give its answer to another AI and say, I've done this before. I've done this where I've just taken the thread, put it in another AI and said, I've just done this with your favorite friend, so and so AI, and I want you to review and critique this and tell me where you agree or don't agree. And you know what? It's astoundingly honest. Astoundingly honest. It's not programmed to lie or be favorite. Now, I say that with a bit of conditional because I can't prove to you that there's no such thing out there as an AI that won't lie to you on this point. And that it isn't actually programmed to say, oh, this little thread is asking me to compare. I need to now, pour oil on the other guy. I can't prove to you that that won't happen. But in my experience, I've seen a pretty honest review. And at least to the extent that that's been useful to me. So I get this from one, and I sent to another, and it said, sometimes the second AI says, actually, this is surprisingly good. This is really interesting. And like, here's all the things where I agree with it. And here's a couple of things that I'm not so sure. It's, wonderful. Or just, phone a friend, ask a colleague, that person sitting over there, that other thing. What do you think of this? Just another human brain. They may not be the expert, but just another human brain on it might be what's needed to just give you that little trigger that says, oh, that's the bit I'm missing. I need to dig deeper into that. And when all else fails, no, not when all else fails. When you need it, reach for the knowledgeable expert. Stretch for them if you have to. Because even if you get to this point and everything stacks up, it's giving you a great justification. A second AI has said, absolutely, I agree. It's argued with itself terribly. And the colleague has said, yeah, that looks pretty good. That still doesn't mean it's right. That still doesn't mean that the original AI's answer is actually correct. It is not proof of that. It's a little bit more evidence, but it's not proof. And if you need proof, talk to someone who actually knows. There is no substitute for that. No substitute for absolute certainty of the lived human experience and accumulated knowledge. So let's break that down in a couple of stages, right? This is a bit of a repeat of the point. Here they are. Step one, ask for justification, right? Get it to say, why do you think this? Why should I believe you? Get it to go into a depth of logic. As you do this more often, you'll find ways to word that makes it a little sharper and punchy, and you'll find easy ways of saying, like, give me your causality, show the logic, show the cause and effect, whatever words you want to use. Argue with yourself. Give me reasons why you might be wrong. Better still, give me reasons why someone else might argue against this. Let it hypothesize and let it reach a little bit further for what that counter argument might contain. And then review it with some other source, another AI or another human being. But when it really matters, call an expert. We humans are not at all limited by just leaning on AI. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, it's cheap. And yeah, it feels good. But for millennia, we've been successful calling on the experts. And we might learn a thing or two from AI, but we might learn even more from a human expert. So don't lose that habit. Don't lose that strength. This brings us to the final point. What is the value of the human being? We're going to go into a little bit more detail of this next week, because when we're going to talk about the future of AI, we're going to be talking about more things that might challenge or reset the value of the human in the loop. But we are the ones accountable for the results. We still are, we will be. Right? And, to have a real cynical view of this, you need someone to fire when things go horribly wrong. You need someone to yell at. You need someone to blame. Someone needs to carry the responsibility. It won't be a machine. It'll be the person handling that machine, responsible for that machine. Because ultimately, humans are accountable for human decisions, even when an AI makes them. And really, AIs for us in the general workplace should never be making our decisions. We are not just specifying on deciding what's good or bad. We are deciding the entire assessment criteria. We own that. We don't just own the final judgment. We own the way in which judgment is obtained. And that starts with the full prompt that we give it that set a bunch of parameters. And it ends when we keep control of here's what quality looks like for me. Here's the areas that are important to me. Here's what I'm measuring. And here's my final decision. We own all of that. And we need to keep control of that. Because that is the one piece of human involvement that we should always have. We should never let go of, because that's our value as a person. If we're nothing more than a clever AI wrangler, then we're no better than the next human AI wrangler. We might be replaced by them or just by a better AI. Our real value is our judgment, our ability to perceive the big picture, our ability to harness expertise, and our ability to make decisions. In fact, I would argue that our ability to make decisions is the single most human trait that separates us from every other species on the planet. That is our humanity, and we have to keep it. Let's toss up the next poll, please. Then we'll take some questions.
Yes, Lil. Yes, once Lil puts a poll up, I've got two questions for you, Brenton. I've got one from Jonathan. Sorry, Jonathan, can you create your thread in a third party, i.e. Word, and when the thread goes offline, you start again directing the AI?
Let me make sure I'm understanding that correctly. You create a thread
Mm,
in a third party document.
mm. And when the
When the
thread, yeah, the thread goes offline, you start again directing the AI.
I think the key part of that question is when the thread goes offline.
Mm,
So so when you have an existing thread, there is a benefit to active memory, right? So if you have an active thread and it's constantly ticking over,
mm,
there is a benefit that the back end systems,
mm.
the data center, is going to be holding that a token count in its active memory whilst you keep triggering prompts within a time window. And there is a benefit to that. But if you fall out of that time window, which I often do, I mean, I didn't write this entire thread with the AI in a single day. It happened over weeks. And so it comes back to it and it's no longer in the active memory of the data center, but the thread is all there. And so even though the software might have gone offline for a time, when I ask the next prompt, it's able to look back at everything and bring it all back into its contextual window, put all the pieces together, and then give me an answer that's still informed by everything that's gone on before. Now, do you want to put that in a third party thing like Word or something? Well, if you're talking about divergence and you're saying, I've got a thread and I've got a flow, but I just want to remember what I'm going to do elsewhere. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Whether or not you do what I suggested and you say, okay, AI, give me this little bit that I can snip out, and then you put that in a Word document whilst you carry on with your active memory thread, there is value in that because there is an active memory benefit. So in that sense, that suggestion from Jonathan can be worthwhile. Don't necessarily flip over to a new thread and open that and cause the memory shunt to happen. You just stick it in a Word document if you really can come back to it later and you want to maintain the hot memory of what's going on in the data center's RAM at that time.
Yes, great answer, Brenton. Steve, I've got here, is Crow at QQ largely model agnostic, irrespective of ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini?
Yes, I use it with all three. I use all three
Mhm.
and I would adopt the same philosophy with all three. They all are sufficiently similar that they will all benefit adequately from all of those six pillars of input.
Great, fantastic. And one more. Once I was trying to ask one of the OpenAI apps to create a cartoon picture to express a political view for a country, and it rejected to create that cartoon by answering it will not create it because the population of that country does not have the same political view. This sounds like a programmed benefit of chosen political view, or is it using its own logic?
So that's a guardrail. That's an example of what's called a guardrail, and that is decided, designed, and implemented at the managerial or executive level of the way of the policies of the company running that AI. So the AI and its company have said, we are not going to allow our AI to be creating what you would call satirical humor in political oppositional terms. And it might do that, and I'm only guessing here, but it might do that because those things can create politically sensitive outcomes. Now, the wording that was used is that it's not in alignment with the political views of that country. So that's why it gets viewed as satire. So it's a bit about saying, well, if you try to express humor, the risk that the AI sees is that that's at the expense of a particular nation. And in some places, that's funny. And in some places, it's hugely offensive. And so an AI might have guardrails that say we're going to avoid that risk by simply as a policy not allowing this kind of clash to take place using our systems. So, it falls into the same broad category of, not for pornography, not for, how to build destructive weapons. It's, not for other stuff like that. Similar place where these policies come from and not something that we as the user can work with or adjust or change.
Great. I got two more questions. Kevin Croft, but before we finish, if I have multiple different threads in the same AI tool, how reliable should I expect the AI to remember the contents of that particular thread as I swap back and forth between them over time, possibly 7 weeks or a couple of months?
So the hot memory window that I talked about is usually measured in minutes of activity. So if you've been idle for an hour or two, even though the window is still open, prompt flashing, you may have already dropped out of the hot memory. You probably have dropped out of the hot memory of the data center. It doesn't depend entirely on which model, which data center, many, many things, but you should only assume that the advantages of staying in hot memory are applicable with real continuous usage. But the systems are designed to come back days, weeks, months later, and it really doesn't matter how long the gap is because the process is the same. It goes back and reactivates the entire thread, loads everything back into its contextual window. And the only risk you have is if your thread is already too large for the contextual window, it's only going to go back until it look backwards until it fills up its contextual window. It'll go to the very top and say first couple of prompts, they're important. And then from the last ones back. So the time delay doesn't matter. The length of the thread matters. And so I've regularly found myself saying to the AI, asking the AI, we've covered a lot here. How close are we to reaching your token limit for this thread? Because that's an important thing I need to know. And it'll tell me, it'll give me a broad answer, not a precise one. And at some point, I might say, I need to carry on this conversation in a brand new thread. Give me a lengthy summary. Whilst you've still got the token count to do it, give me this lengthy summary that lets me pick this up in another thread and carry on. I have done that before. I do it less because as the years go by, actual token windows keep expanding, but it might be needed sometimes.
Great.
Last
And
question.
last question. Can you explain quickly the difference between conflation versus hallucination on the surface? They sound familiar.
They are similar. So conflation is where a little bit of evidence of something exists in multiple places in a data source or different data sources, but they're not exactly in the same fact. That they are similar enough that the AI kind of rates them as being kind of similar, but they're a little bit different. And conflation means that it mushes those facts together and turns them into a single fact. And one of my favorite examples is game guides for computer games. And when I talk to teens and kids about this, I say to them, one of the best ways you can learn how AI conflates is ask it for advice on what you should do in one of your favorite games that you really know very well, but one that's been around for a while. Because the game has evolved, different versions have come out, and how you play it and how you win has often changed. And the AI can't figure that out. So it's going to take a bit of advice from last week and last year and 3 years ago And it's got to turn that into one fact and say, and here's how you win. And it'll be half right and half wrong. That's conflation. But the facts already exist. Hallucination is where it turns around and says, oh, you should do this in the game using this. And that thing just doesn't exist in the game anywhere. There is no such item. There is no such process. It just doesn't exist. And so it's not a conflation of facts that it's looked at. It's a hallucination, or rather an inference. It's looked at all of its algorithms and it said, there's a probability that this might exist. So I'm going to say it does. And that's a hallucination.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Brenton. And just to finish up the third poll. So, which of the following has
Yeah.
been the most useful concept in topic three? And it was the Crow
Crow
QQ
QQ. More than,
framework.
yeah, okay. That's a heavy weighting for that, which is great. But everything we covered had a little bit, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
Next week, crystal ball. Where's it heading next? Right. So this is going to be a lot of what if, maybe possibilities, etc. A little bit of fun, and it not hard science. A lot of speculative stuff next week, but I'm going to really stick to the stuff that we're really starting to see. But I'm not going to talk. This is not a science thing next week. This is going to be about use cases and commercial inference, where the money is likely to push this and why. All right, and a little bit of my own opinion with all that as well. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. So less to learn, but maybe more to think about.
great. Thank you so much for that, Brenton. Everyone, thank you so much for attending. Do stay tuned, obviously, for next week on the Wednesday. And if you have any questions, please do email us. But until then, thank you very much, Brenton. Lil, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for all the questions, participations, wonderful chat. See you all next week. That's all from me for now. Thank you and good night.